Okay. Good evening, everybody. Let's try that one more time to make sure you're really here. Good evening, everybody. Thank you very much. I want to make sure that all of the folks on the live stream can hear you and know that we've got a lot of great folks in the room. Thank you so much for coming out on a Wednesday night. This is the State of the School Part 2, and tonight I'm going to be talking with you about the future of King. The reason why I can spend time tonight doing that is because I've now spent enough time here at King learning about the school through my own observations and also learning about your perspectives on the school that I'm excited to share with you some thoughts about where we are right now and where we're going to be going together in the future. So before I get started with the meat of this presentation, I do want to just give a very big personal thanks to all of you who are in the room, all of you who are on live stream, and all of those who just are not with us tonight for welcoming me so warmly to this community. Anybody who comes in new to a school, especially in the boss position, learns not to expect the kind of welcome that I've actually gotten at this school. And so I'm really, really grateful to all of you for teaching me how to speak King. And I'm hoping that as you hear me talk about our school tonight, that it's going to resonate with you a lot, because really what I'm going to be sharing with you in many ways is all that I've learned through you. So thank you so much. I'm also proud to say that I now know what a squall is. So that was fascinating last week. So tonight, as we talk about the state of the school, I'm going to be talking a lot about, first of all, the foundation that exists here. And I'm going to be sharing with you, again, my observations and my thoughts about what's happening at the school currently, but then also taking a look forward to think about some strategic opportunities that we're going to have in the future to continue to deliver a transformational experience for our students. And what that means is also thinking ahead to the future about how to make that happen and the roles that all of us are going to play in continuing to evolve the school into the most dynamic learning community that we possibly can. And so as we go through this, I think one of the things that you're going to hear in me is a ton of confidence in what this school stands for and in, again, the educational experience that our children have. And I'm reminded as I think about all of these topics that I'm going to hit tonight, which will include the program. I'll spend probably the most time on our program, our community, and our culture, as well as the strategic planning process that we've just kicked off. I'm just thrilled to be at a school where I get to talk about our strengths and moving on to more strengths. And that's exactly why I wanted to join this school in the first place. I know faces pretty well right now, and I'm actually getting to know names pretty well, but I'm still on that learning curve. So when I think about the time that I've gotten to spend with all of the groups that you see up here, colleagues and trustees, obviously, but also having gotten to spend a lot of time with parents. Most of you know that I held meetings for parents to come in and share perspectives with me, and I was able to meet with just about 200 parents in these meetings over the course of a few months. That's a ton of perspective. And what was great about that is that I got perspective from all different divisions. I had parents at the table usually from all 3 divisions in the school, whose kids are on all 3 divisions. I've also had the opportunity to meet a lot of parents of alumni, so I've gotten a lot of history of the school through their eyes. I've been meeting with students really informally for the most part up to this point, but in the coming months, really a little bit later into the spring, I'm going to, for the first time, start what will be a tradition for me here, which is meeting with seniors in particular. This is a practice I've used for a long time, and that is to meet with seniors pretty close to the time that they've graduated so that they can share with me what their experiences have been at the school. Part of that is because I like to have dedicated time with students, which I don't get to do because I'm not teaching a class right now. I'll be a special guest star in a class in the next couple weeks, but not teaching a whole class. And also because seniors actually usually have really great suggestions for improvements. And in my experience, there's usually something at the schools where I've worked that changes every year because of the feedback I get from our seniors. So that's going to happen soon. And you'll hear more about that as well, because I'll make sure that everybody knows that's happening. One of the great things about this school that I've learned is that alumni from King, and that means all the different iterations of King, are actually really well connected to our school, and they want to stay connected. So whether I've gotten to meet with alumni at homecoming or some of the cocktail parties that have been associated with the alumni events, we have a fantastic alumni board. They're really active. They continue to bring their friends in and make sure that they're still not just connected with King, but supporting King. I've learned a ton about the history of the school through them as well, which has been wonderful, as well as their parents. The local community, though, and the Fairchester area, and then even kind of the broader stage of independent schools across the United States, is also a major focus of mine as the head of school. I actually think that one of my most important responsibilities is to be a great face and voice for King School out in the world. And so, for example, one of the things I've spent some time doing is getting to know some of the people in our local community of Stamford, for example. So that means getting a meeting with the superintendent of schools in Stamford, who's just absolutely lovely, and we had a wonderful conversation about ways that we can partner together. I've been spending some time with some nonprofits in Stamford, for example, Building One Community, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with. Building One actually serves immigrant communities in Stamford and was actually founded by two women who are parents of alumni at King. And so getting to know that and getting to know the city in which our school lives is important for us, because it opens up opportunities for our students to get out into the community themselves. On top of that, the Fairchester area, of course, is full of independent schools. I've spent a lot of time getting around to other school campuses, first of all, to meet the other heads in the area and to introduce myself so they know that I'm here and I'm leading here. And it's also given me an opportunity to just kind of check out their campuses and see, what might look appealing, and maybe also some things that we would never want to do here because it looks like a mistake. And but it's definitely given me a lot of perspective, for sure. And again, just developing those relationships, because it is important that we have collegial relationships even with the schools with whom we are in competition, for sure. And then on the broader stage, I actually want to take every opportunity that I can to introduce people outside of the Fairchester area to King School. There are ways in which I'm going to describe later on in this presentation that I think that our school can be leading independent schools in the work that we do here, both in terms of our program and in terms of our culture and community. And so whenever I have the opportunity, for example, I'm a member of the faculty of the Institute for New Heads, and that is a national conference that happens every summer where I, along with 6 of my colleagues from around the country, train people who are becoming heads for the first time how to do this job. And what that means is that I have access to ideas that are and actions that are happening at schools all over the country, and I also get to share a lot about what King does. I'll be making a presentation at the national conference in a couple of weeks as well. And the reason why is because I believe so much in what we're doing, and I want to make sure that we make a name for ourselves, not just in our area where we already have a great reputation, but again, more broadly than that, because some of the work that we're doing here actually is work that I think others should be paying attention to. And so that definitely takes a lot of my time. The King brand is really important. Our brand is really just another word for our reputation. And I want it to be known locally, and I want it to be known nationally. And so as I think then about what I've been learning about our program in particular, the way that I'm going to describe this to you is I'm going to start by describing my own observations and also the perspectives I've learned about different parts of our program, areas in particular where I think that we're already really strong, and then I'm going to toggle each time to ways in which I'd like to see us go more broadly and more deeply in these areas. And I'm going to start by talking with you about research. Now, with research, I know that a lot of times when we think about research, we think about, writing a paper, right? You do a book report, you go onto Google, learn a few things, put it into a few paragraphs, and then you're done. And research, actually, I think, is one of the things that we already do well here. And what's great about that is that we do it well across the board. So, for example, one day when I was walking back to my office in the lower school, I came in through the main doors there and saw a group of first graders with their teacher, Mr. Leonard, and they all had clipboards. If you follow me on Instagram, and if you don't, why aren't you following me on Instagram? You should be. But on Instagram that day, I captured some shots of the students with clipboards and pencils, and they were walking around taking notes on all the different kinds of matter that they could observe in that area, and then they did that in other areas of the school. After they gathered their data, they then went back to their classroom with Mr. Leonard, and he taught them how to actually do some calculations on it so that they could analyze the data, and then they had to draw some conclusions. That's the basics of research right there. First graders can do that, and they were learning to think and to work like researchers. Now, if you fast forward to the upper school, for example, which is the area where we oftentimes associate research happening, we have some really fabulous programs happening right now, some of which are actually kind of new to the school. So if you came to State of the School Part 1, you heard me talk about a couple of new programs. We have the Advanced Math and Science Research Program, and there is a special part of that program that encourages students who are in the STEM disciplines impossible in particular, to really focus on particular research studies that will allow them to prepare for academic competitions. That's something that makes our students actually very, very competitive when it comes to getting into the colleges that they want to attend. Now, on the humanities side, and that was the program that was funded by the Nash family. On the humanities side, we now have the Tom Main Scholarship Program, which encourages students to do research in the social sciences, where they actually have to think globally about major problems, why the problems exist, and different ways that they would suggest that we can impact those problems. These could be like massive problems like, climate change, for example. And what's great about that is it's a program that involves some travel and some study as well, and that was funded by the Millichip family. So these are really interesting ways that I'm already seeing research impact our program. As I think about how we can go further with this, I would think about it in this sense. I think all of us have heard different colleges and universities talk about themselves sometimes as liberal arts institutions. And we have always at King thought of ourselves as a liberal arts institution. Now, when I say liberal arts, of course, this is not a political distinction. This is an academic one. It's the idea that our students have broad access to all different kinds of disciplines so that they can learn how to think as well as possible in as many different ways as possible. And at the same time, have the opportunity to specialize as they do so. Now, as a research institution, though, there's a seriousness with which those schools, and I think our school, needs to take this practice of really learning how to find and identify the best information possible that's out there. And the reason why is because right now we live in a world where bad information has proliferated. We all know this. So what I actually think is most important for our students as they get ready to enter that world where they're going to be bombarded with information all the time is to learn the discipline of how to identify good information from bad, how to analyze that information, how to synthesize that information, and most importantly, how to make meaning out of it, and how to do that in ways that makes them smarter. Now, one of the things that I actually think is most important for our students to know when it comes to research is that it actually matters how you research, it matters with whom you research, and that it matters actually what you can make out of it. Just knowing stuff is not enough. There has to be meaning there. And so what this means is that at the end of the day, what we do as both a liberal arts and a research institution is that we have committed ourselves deeply to teaching students how to think. We will never be an institution that teaches students what to think. There's a very big difference between those two approaches. And both on a very personal level and on a professional level, I think this is a place where King can really plant a flag. I think that we've already got the building blocks of this, but thinking about this as a pre-K through 12 endeavor where we really teach students the discipline of being researchers across all of the disciplines that they are exposed to here at King to make meaning and to make things that are new, I think that's actually something that can be a real differentiator for us because of the depth that's required in that. I know this is something that actually my colleagues are very excited about as well as a possibility. Now, in terms of what that will look like down the road in terms of program, that we're not sure about yet. But I think that in terms of the concept of us as a research institution, that's a place where I'm very excited for us to think more deeply. Now, hand in hand with this concept of research and us being a research institution is this idea of challenge. One of the things that I've definitely heard from students and from families is that the program here is definitely challenging. And we certainly know that we need to have students here who have the kind of capacity where they can really access that. I think also that what has been important for me to understand is how the challenge here looks and feels differently to students compared to students in other schools. And again, thinking about how King is different and better than other schools in this regard, one of the things that I've learned about this school is that a lot of attention is paid at all different grade levels to making sure that students don't just work hard and long to say that they've worked hard and long. That instead, our teachers actually take a lot of time to do whatever possible to make the work meaningful for students. So there are schools, for example, where it's a badge of honor to say that, well, I just did 7 hours of homework tonight. I mean, first of all, they say 7 hours, but if there's a lot of social media in there, maybe the math is a little off, right? But at the same time, we're a school that is committed to not making the mistake of confusing volume of work with rigor of work. If we want authentic challenge, then we want our students to really be thinking. And when we teach them how to think and we give them work that encourages them to do that, both in the classroom and at home, then we're making a better difference in their ability to be smarter. Now, I think that as far as that goes, what I've been hearing from people is that actually this is manifesting pretty beautifully, especially right now in terms of the outcome that I know everybody cares about, including us, which is the college process. If you look at how our seniors this year, for example, are doing in their college acceptances, they're doing beautifully. We are so proud of them. They're getting into really some of the best colleges in the U.S., and that's because they have been authentically challenged. This all comes from their relationships with their teachers. We've always kind of known anecdotally that a teacher-student relationship is key to a student's academic success. There's also research now that backs that up, that shows that students who actually trust their teachers, they achieve more academically than students who don't. Students who are known achieve more than students who feel anonymous. And all of that is coming into play here in ways that I've heard so many of you tell me makes a visible difference in the experience of your child, an audible difference in the experience of your child. And that's one of the reasons why you chose our school. So knowing that this is a strength of ours, and knowing that it does matter to all of us what the outcomes are going to be, one of the things I'm thinking a lot about right now are the ways in which we can continue to leverage all of this for our students' continued success. And specifically, if I'm going to think about our college counseling program, we are unique in that we have a true 4-year college counseling program here. Usually with schools, you hear that college counselors just start acknowledging students when they're in 11th grade, sometimes like second semester of 11th grade. In our school, students who are in 9th grade are connected with a college counselor. And in a lot of ways, well, first of all, it's not because they're making college lists when they're in 9th grade, but the purpose of starting that relationship that young is to get students to start to think about themselves differently than they might otherwise. So sometimes it's about choosing classes and starting to think about really where their interests lie, and choosing classes that are going to challenge them appropriately, and especially if they have an idea of the type of college they want to attend, making sure that the choices they're making now are going to set them up for that kind of success. And that's something that our college counselors have been great at. Now, what I wonder about is, and what I'm excited to think more about together, is how that model might be extended so that it's a shared experience amongst all students, again, grades pre through 12. So if I ask a student in, for example, second grade, why she's special, that's language that a second grader can understand. If I ask a 12th grader who is about to write her college essay why she's fascinating, just think about that for a minute. If you ask your child why she's fascinating, what do you think she might say? Now, depending on the age, right, it could be like, oh, I don't know, because I just am, right, if they're too young for that. But if we start training them how to think about themselves in terms of their own complexity, in terms of their own passions and interests, what that means is that it makes for a much more compelling story for them as an applicant to college, an applicant to internships, and everything else along the way. And it's that self-knowledge, actually, that will differentiate them from other students who also have excellent GPAs, who also have excellent test scores. GPAs and test scores, as we all know, are not enough on their own to help a student get into college. There has to be the human side that needs to be just as well formed, if not more so, because they have to be able to tell their own story. So as we continue down the road, while we're already good at this, the more intentional we are about building these skills in students so that they have the skills that they need, they also have the story to tell, and that's what's going to make them the most successful. And that's where all of the different challenges will come home and be crystallized into a story that will be the most compelling for them. That's something that I think can differentiate us from other schools quite easily. And again, we have a lot of this already in place. Another concept that I'm thinking a lot about as I think about the world our students are going to enter when they leave here is this idea of students learning how to be nimble. Nimbleness. Now, when we think about being nimble, I think one of the things that comes to my mind, for example, is resilience. We know at this point that the students who are in school right now are probably going to have a lot of different jobs before they retire. That's something new. And so what that means is that our students are going to have to be able to turn on a dime. Our students actually need to be taught now how to remain curious and how to actually be true lifelong learners. Because if they go into the world knowing that learning new things, whether it's skills, whether it's networking, whether it's an entirely new field, if they go into the world knowing that that's the normal and they're prepared for that because they've practiced it here, then they are going to be much better prepared to be successful than others. And so when I think about some of the ways that we do this really well now, I actually think of the Innovation Lab in a lot of ways. This is the first place that my brain goes. Because in the Innovation Lab, and if you haven't actually spent any time in there, I'd encourage you to come in. Any day you happen to be on campus, just walk in. Because that is a space where students can go in and try and fail and try and fail until they get something right. And the expectation is that they have to turn on a dime. They have to be able to change their thinking. They have to be able to pivot and see the problem from a different angle in order to solve it, or at least to impact it. The great thing about the Innovation Lab, too, is that it encourages all different kinds of thinkers to come in and try to create their own projects. So there are classes being taught in the lab now, and Catherine Warren has a couple of them to offer, which are popular, as you would imagine. But she also creates space for students who can walk in and say, all right, I have this really good idea for a project, and I think this is what I want to do. And in those cases, she's able to help them kind of refine the idea, identify the problem that has to be solved, and then let them get on their way. She also is there for the students who come in and say, I don't really know. I mean, like, I think I kind of am interested in electricity, but maybe it's water I really care about. I'm not really sure. And she can also sit with those students and help them, again, crystallize their idea and then point them in the right directions. So she can coach a little, she can coach a lot. But at some point, no matter who's working in the lab, at some point, she does know when to step back and not help them because they're going to have to figure it out on their own. The Innovation Lab is exactly the kind of space that students need to think nimbly. And so, again, as I think about what this means for King's future, what I'm excited about is the possibility of teachers, for example, in the middle and the upper school, because those are the students who currently have access to the Innovation Lab, to think about ways that teachers can connect their existing curriculum to the lab. What kinds of projects might a history teacher be able to create that are best done in that kind of an environment with those kinds of tools? With STEM disciplines, it's not even a leap. It's easy to think about all the different kinds of engineering that can go on there, and I've seen some of it for myself. But thinking creatively about how other disciplines can also test out ideas in that kind of a learning atmosphere gets me really excited. But what also gets me excited is, for example, when Amy Vorenberg, who is our head of lower school, comes in and says, you know what, I just made an appointment to go talk to Catherine Warren in the Innovation Lab so that we can talk about the kinds of skills that she thinks are most important for students to have as little kids, so that we can teach our preschool students skills right now that will make it really easy for them to make the best use out of the Innovation Lab when they get into the middle and the upper school, so that it's a through line through the program. We have a maker space in the lower school. How do we build that out so, again, those students have access to the same kinds of opportunities to fail and to learn from their failure? And to understand that when you fail at a project like that, you are actually learning. Doesn't mean you are a failure, it means you are learning. And the more often that we put our students in the position to face real adversity, the better prepared they're going to be. But this is something that I think is essential. It's essential for being successful in the world that our students are going to enter. And there are programmatic ways for us to do it. And then that brings me to the last of the essential skills that I'm going to talk about here, and this is EQ. Now, before I get to the EQ, just to make sure we're all on the same page here, we all know what IQ is, right? Do you remember what this is, what it stands for? Do you remember what it stands for? People aren't so sure. Okay, I'm hearing like a quotient. You're right about the quotient. That's good. So IQ is your intelligence quotient. And it's shorthand for smart, right? The thing with the intelligent quotient, as it were, is you get this number that gets spit out at you after you've taken a test. And interestingly, of course, I don't know when the last time is you took an IQ test, but it's not a content-based test. It actually tests your conceptual thinking. So it tests what kind of thinker you are and how much elasticity you have in terms of how you think. And we've always known that your, as I said before, your academic capacity matters. It certainly matters here. And yet we also know now, happily, unlike when we were all in school, we all are actually smarter now about what it means to be smart, because there are lots of ways to be smart. When we were in school, you were either smart or not smart. We know it's not quite that simple anymore. But IQ is at least designed to measure some of that. Now, EQ, on the other hand, is emotional. The emotional quotient. Sometimes people talk about it as emotional intelligence as well. I prefer the latter, but EQ is easier to say. Now, the reason why I have this here as part of the program side is because I think for what has become increasingly clear is that colleges are looking for EQ as much as they're looking for other kinds of skills that you traditionally associate with being in school. So yes, they want to see what your grades are, but colleges are also telling us in the K-12 world that they also want students who have demonstrated they know what it means to live and work in community. They want demonstration of a student's ability to relate to other people. They want demonstration of their ability not just to relate to people who look like them and sound like them, but people who are really different than they are, and how to actually make things work in collaboration. And so one of the reasons why colleges are talking about that so much is because businesses are saying the same thing. One of the things that has come up at a number of my parent meetings, for example, is this desire for us to continue to teach students some of the really hard skills around things like coding. And we've had some really interesting conversations, for example, about artificial intelligence, AI. And students have to be prepared for this. And unless they have those hard skills, they won't be prepared. And I agree. I think our students do need to know how to code. I also think they need to know how to write. And what I also know is as artificial intelligence rises, EQ has to rise right along with it, and if not, even be a little ahead. And the reason why is because AI can never take the place of what happens when humans are together. That cannot take the place of collaboration, and it certainly cannot take the place of relationships, because no matter whatever happens with computers, humans will always be social animals, and we need to be able to relate to one another and to do it well. This is where I think King is enormously well prepared to take on this challenge. Because one of the things, and you'll hear me talk about this in a minute when we talk about community, one of the things I've come to know is absolutely true about this place, and we all say this about ourselves, is that we place really high value on the relationships that we have with one another. And we know that those relationships have to be made and they have to be cultivated. It's always an iterative process. And so what I know is that there are places in our curriculum right now where students are learning about these kinds of skills. Like I said, essential skills for life. And so what I know is that when the second graders have, for example, a morning meeting in their classroom and they have to learn how to listen to one another, that's part of what we're talking about. Those are skills that actually can be taught. And it's not just about being nice to each other. That's just the beginning. It's actually learning the key skills of how to work together in ways that make work possible. I know that, for example, when the middle school students are taking life skills, when the students in the upper school are taking leadership courses, that's embedded in there. And what I would love to see more of is intentional programming that puts students in the kind of position to practice the kinds of activities that they will experience when they go to college, when they go into business and have jobs, so that as much as possible, they get to practice what it will actually be like to sit around a table with people who are trying to make sure that their company is as profitable as possible, but doing so sometimes by conference call, by video conference call, sometimes in a room where people speak multiple languages, definitely in a room where people do not think the same way. I mean, there's been a lot of research on this too. Businesses that have diverse workforces and diverse boards actually are more profitable. And the reason why is because they push each other to think more differently. Well, in order to be open to that, you need the hard skills of EQ. I know people call them soft skills. I actually think they're hard skills, but they can be taught and they can be learned. And in a community that already places value on the relationship and knows the connection to academic success, I think we are extremely well prepared for this. But it takes some intentional planning in terms of our program. So those are some of the opportunities that we have on the program side. I'm now going to talk to you a little bit more about our community, what I've learned about the community, where our strengths are, and again, where I think we can go even more deeply. Now, first, I have definitely found that this is a school that is full of highly skilled people. Our parent body comes from so many different backgrounds in terms of business expertise and experience, and definitely something that I have already seen you're willing to share with us here at school for a lot of different purposes. And my hope is that over the years we can continue to build our relationships with you all as families so that our students can get the most benefit from that as possible, whether it's through senior projects or otherwise. I also, of course, have the privilege of working with an incredibly highly skilled faculty. And this is something that I've come to know now both through my own observations, but also because I've heard this all from you. And so what I've learned, first of all, is that one of the reasons why I think our faculty at all of the grade levels is dynamic is because we are committed at this school to their professional growth and development. So we call that PGD for short. Now, PGD is something that, for example, again, at State of the School Part 1, you heard me talk about because this is a fund that actually is supported directly by the annual fund every year. So when you give to the annual fund, what you're funding is opportunities for teachers to deepen their learning, to deepen their own experiences, and then necessarily bring it back to the classroom so that students can benefit. Now, some of you, I think, might remember, and this was about 1.5 years ago when Patrick from the high school talked about I think it was a sabbatical opportunity, actually, to go on a trip to Northern Ireland, learn about Ireland, and then bring it back to school and create an entire course on Northern Ireland that the students can now take, and about which I hear nothing but amazing things. Those kind of direct connections between teachers' work outside of school and what happens in their classrooms is something that I think makes our school really quite different and better than others. And because we actually commit more to our PG&D here at King, I've seen the benchmarking. Our program is much more robust than other schools. That means that we can set the expectation for our teachers to continually learn and bring that back to the students. Now, I am a very big believer in supporting teachers in this way. And I am also a very big believer in that intersection between support and accountability. Because as much as I have heard lots of stories from families and from students about teachers that you have found to be really, really effective for your kids, I also have heard about some experiences where that was not the case. And so what I know here is that we do have a really good system for accountability for teachers. It's definitely up to all of us to make sure that we use that program as much as we can to continue to keep people growing, and if they are not, then to part ways when necessary. Those two things have to go together. But the result will always be a commitment to attracting and retaining the absolute best faculty possible at this school. That is always the goal. The Board of Trustees is committed to this. I am committed to this, and I know that we as an institution are committed to this. So I think that as time goes on, this is an area where I think we really need to continue to double down. One of the things that we think about when it comes to recruiting is making sure that we are casting the widest net possible and looking to attract teachers who are excellent from all areas of the country. Hey, if I can move here from California, lots of other people can too, right? This school actually is very, very attractive. And again, it's our job to go out and make sure people know about us, know just how amazing we are, and then make sure that we can land them here. Now, I think that when it comes to the other word that I think really kind of encapsulates this community, it is engaged. And this actually takes a lot of different forms. One of the things that I've mentioned a few times now is that student-teacher relationship and how much value we as a school put on that, because we know it's everything. We want our students to be known as individuals. We want them to be in places where they feel safe enough to be really uncomfortable and take risks. And we also know that it takes a village to do this. So one of the ways that I think I've been most impressed is by just kind of walking either by or into classrooms and realizing that there is no place in any King classroom really where a student can hide. There are no back rows in this school. And what that means is that students really have no choice but to be engaged. They might be quiet, but that doesn't mean that they're not fully present in their learning. And we have teachers who are committed to making that happen. Another way that I've seen that this is an engaged community actually has come from all my interactions with you all as parents. If I just look out right now at how many people, again, have come out on a Wednesday night, you are engaged in this community. You want this to be the best school possible, and you know that you have a role in making it that way. All of us, every single one of us does. And so I think that as I look ahead to the kind of engagement that I already see, I see more opportunities actually, I think, for adults to get together and learn together. One of the things I have heard a lot from parents is that we have, like, for example, we brought in some great guest speakers. If any of you were able to come and hear Chris Herron, for example, who spoke recently both to the upper school students and then to a group of parents. He was so dynamic, so engaging. And when I talked to people afterwards, they said, this was great, I want more. I gave a presentation to a group of parents not too long ago also on diversity, equity, and inclusion. And at the end, they all said, we just want more. And I think some of this has to do with bringing in speakers for sure, but I think also some of this has to do with thinking really carefully about what it means to be a well-educated parent. We talk all of the time about well-educated kids. I'm looking forward to thinking more broadly and deeply about what kind of programming we can have to really fully engage families in their own education and in the life of the school. Sometimes so that you can share in some of the experiences that your students get to have, but also so that we can be together as adults who are partners in educating the kids. You've probably heard me say this before. You know your students best. They're your kids. And you have perspective that we can't have here at school. And on the flip side, we have perspective that you can't have either because we have them in a different way. Now, we all know them well. It doesn't mean they don't surprise us sometimes. They always surprise us sometimes, that's for sure. But still, how do we turn our dedication to each individual student and broaden it in such a way that our entire community is strengthened even more than it already is? And that actually brings me to the last point here under our community. Because again, when we're talking about our community, we're talking about all the people in it. And one of the things that I've appreciated about learning perspectives on King is actually the value that I keep hearing people place on the diversity at this school. We're a school that I think, especially for the area, is a diverse school in so many different ways. I know that a lot of times when I say the word diverse, people automatically go to race and ethnicity. And that is definitely one way in which we are diverse. And our diversity here is visible in that way. And we are also diverse in so many other ways. We're diverse in terms of the way that people identify religiously. We are diverse in terms of political opinion, very diverse actually. We are diverse in terms of socioeconomic status. We're diverse in terms of our countries of origin. In all three divisions, you can see evidence of this. I think it's 65 different flags, including, of course, the United States, that are countries that parents in this community are native to. It's incredible diversity. Think about the perspective that our students get to learn with and from on an everyday basis. It's just their normal. And again, that prepares them for the world that they're going to enter. And I know that people place value on this. I've even heard from alumni, and especially some of the older alumni who knew the school in all of its different iterations, that that's always been the marker of our school. We've always been that school, and it's a part of who we are. And that's all great. We can definitely keep bringing lots of different people together. It's the inclusive part, I think, that gets a little bit harder. What does it really mean to be inclusive? What does it really mean to make space for everybody at the school? And again, I actually think that we do this really well. There's a lot of different ways that I've seen evidence, for example, that our students do not see learning as a zero-sum game. And I do hear oftentimes about other schools where it feels a lot more cutthroat, where kids feel like, if I am successful, then you're not, or vice versa, and the kind of atmosphere that can create. That's not who we are. And at the same time, as I said before, when it comes to how we relate to each other and all the different tossed salad of differences that we are, as I think about where I think I'd like us to think even more deeply, I'm committed to this idea that we teach students how to think and not what to think. Everybody is entitled to their own, well-reasoned opinion, for sure. I'm a big fan of evidence, too. I mean, your opinion is, it's usually worth the piece of paper it's written on. But when you really have a reasoned opinion and you know why you believe what you believe, that's such a powerful thing. And when there are significant differences of opinion, how do we make sure that everybody still is treated with respect? How do we make sure that we don't give ourselves passes and say, well, I just don't, for example, and I'm not sure so much about whether this actually happens or not, but if somebody says, you know what, I'm really just not so sure about gay people, so yeah, I'm just not really, I just don't think I can support that. Well, there's room for debate on that, but there's no debate in terms of how that debate should take place. And there is no debate in terms of how a kid who goes to this school should be treated no matter how they identify. The behavior is not up for discussion. The discussion is up for discussion, always. And I think that's where, I think what I'm hoping for in order to be as inclusive as possible is being courageous enough to make space for us to have difficult conversations and to do it in a way where we can demonstrate that it can be done passionately and without fighting. It is possible. You might not know it if you turned on the TV anytime lately, but it is possible. I grew up in a house like that, and I know it. And I've heard from a lot of people that they're hungry for more. So let's see what we can do. And so that's some of my thinking on our community and the people in it. And then finally, I'm going to share with you some thoughts on our culture. So just to be clear, the difference between community and culture, community is the people, culture is how we do things around here. And there's always some overlap there, as you would imagine. So I'm going to start with one of our virtues, and that is the virtue of kindness, being kind. And I'm going to start talking about kindness by kind of planting a flag in the ground. Because I know that sometimes when people hear the word kind, they think about nice. This is not about nice. Nice is being polite, and we are that. And I don't mean to minimize the importance of that. But nice doesn't really pay anybody's rent. Kindness is actually something that is challenging and hard, because when we're called to be kind, we are called to be generous with one another. We are called to be tolerant of different perspectives. We're actually called to be interested and curious about others' experiences in ways that actually cause you to go a lot more deeply than just being polite. And so what that means is basically being in a culture where it's safe enough to be uncomfortable. And this is one of the things that originally drew me to this school, is that this was a flag that the school had already planted, that this is who we were going to be. And part of, one of the stripes on this flag that I'm planting tonight when it comes to kindness also has to do with a word that I used before, and that's difficult. I think people oftentimes make the assumption that because we are a kind school and we're committed to making that happen, that we must not be as challenging. What I've heard from you all for the last 7 months is that that's just not true at all. Our program, which as I like to say, would take the Pepsi challenge with any program out there. We have a really challenging program. Our students are incredibly well prepared for college, and it's just going to keep getting more so. And we have rejected the idea that you have to choose between challenge and kindness. I think it's a both and. It's not an either or. And you all have been telling me the same things. The students have told me the same thing too, which I really appreciate. And so as I think about this, and I think about the ways in which kindness actually infuses itself into the academic experience at this school, because it does. It's infused into the school. What I know we can keep doing more of is what I've mentioned already, is that we can continue making space for that. We can continue making space for us to have more challenging conversations and buck the trends that we see happening out there around us to be the school where we value spirited, passionate, really well-reasoned debate, and then lock arms at the end of that debate and remember that we are all Vikings together. This can be done. We are the school to do it. And then finally, last point on our culture is this concept of student-centered learning. Now, I know that there have been other words that have been used for this in the past. I've heard, sometimes I hear somebody mention personalization again. It's not a term that I've ever really liked very much. I think it gets into some interesting mistakes and areas. But I do think that the school's commitment to student-centeredness and making sure that the decisions that we make in our curricular program, in our co-curricular program, and in everything else that we do here as a community remains our top priority. What this means is that, as I've heard you all talk about how well teachers know your students, how much you appreciate the fact that every student in this school has a learning profile so that teachers can continue to get to know them over the course of their time here and actually think differently about how they teach because of how much they know about their students. I hear you talking about that with a lot of respect, a lot of gratitude, and in some cases, depending on some of the challenges that your children have had, a lot of affection. And that speaks volumes to me. And I think that in terms of that focus on knowing each individual student so we can do the best by each individual student, I think that that is always going to be a marker of a King education and experience. Now, I think that as we continue to go forward with this, that knowing that this is what actually helps our students learn more and learn better and learn more deeply. What I also think will be interesting for us as we continue to go on, because I've talked so much also about the need for us to teach students about EQ and collaboration because they're going to need those skills in the world. I think that there is a very, very healthy tension between that focus on what the individual student needs and what it means to be learning in a community. How do we make sure that we take care of each individual student while also making sure that we're taking care of the group? And I actually think that we thread the needle on this quite well already, because again, I've heard people place value on both, and I've definitely seen it myself. And I think that as we continue to go forward, especially as we think about ways to teach students how to work together in ways where sometimes they might be assessed as groups, for example, that's always an area where there's a rub. Right? How do we actually make sure that teachers are assessing students fairly if they're assessing how they collaborate as well as how they do things individually? I think that there's going to be some interesting conversations and some interesting opportunities out there. And again, thinking more broadly about how schools across the country are starting to do this, I think that we won't necessarily have to reinvent the wheel, but I think that there are some great ideas that we can borrow and make manifest in our programs so that they really feel like King education. But again, I think that putting the student at the center, that they are the reasons why we make the decisions that we do, that will always be, I think, our guidepost. That's why we are who we are. And so when looking back at what I've described to you in terms of where we are as a school right now and where I think we can go, again, strength to strength. You think about all these different areas around program, around our community, around our culture. And as you've already heard as I've been describing all these, there's overlap. There's connection between all of them. None of them exists in its own bubble. None of them exists in a vacuum. And so as I think about all of the opportunities that we have to continue to articulate our program, to make sure that we have the strongest program pre-K to 12, that it's vertically aligned, that we are paying really close attention to the shared experiences that our students have, knowing that they're also going to have lots of different experiences along the way. But the shared experiences that our students have, so that no matter what grade they happen to be in, no matter what grade you happen to be in as their parents, you know you're at King School. You know it's a King education. And the consistency with which we can deliver on those promises. Those are the ways that I get really excited about how we can continue to talk about our institution. We have there's just so much great stuff going on right now. But our identity as a school is something that I think we'll continue, we're going to continue to work to articulate. And again, make sure that the markers of a King education are as clear as possible, well articulated, and beautifully delivered to students of every age in this school. That's where we're going. And so, as we think about how we're going to make this happen, because these ideas I realize are kind of at the higher level at this point and where we're going. One of the things that I think is important for us to think about, and this is actually something that so many of you brought up in your meetings with me as well, is that we know that we're going to have to invest in the school in order to make this happen. We've had, some of you have talked to me, certainly about teachers and how we're going to make sure that we keep compensating teachers well so that we can retain them, for example. Others of you have talked with me a lot about buildings and facilities and playing fields. Everybody knows that we have so much great going on here, and that we also want to make sure that we're investing for the future. And so this is where, as time goes on, you're going to continue to hear me talk about ways in which you can continue to support the school, especially as you get as excited as I am about all of the programs, curricular and co-curricular, that are going to continue to evolve and take our students into the future. So at State of the School Part 1, we kicked off really the fundraising for our annual fund, which, you know, as the name would imply, we do every year. This year, we have a goal of $2.25 million, and as of right now, we are just under $1.7 million, so getting closer all the time to that end goal of $2.25 million. So first of all, if you are somebody who has already given, we have actually 75% parent participation already. I want to say thank you. Thank you so much for participating and for supporting King School. And again, just remember, it always goes back to the faculty and the program. That's where it goes every time. That's what you're supporting when you support the annual fund. So thank you for doing that. The trustees have already come out in force. My colleagues have already come out in force. 100% of us have already contributed, and will continue to do so because we really believe in this place. And so as we go forward and you start to think about some of the things that I'm describing, either that you're currently experiencing or that we're going to continue to build on, and what gets you excited, you can think about ways that you might want to support King even more directly. I've already described to you ways that some of the families have done that through some research programs, for example. There are lots of ways that this happens, and I'll be sharing more opportunities with you about that as we go on. And then finally, I want to talk to you about strategic planning, because strategic planning is a process that I think really pretty much certainly every nonprofit and every independent school engages in. And this is the year when King is getting ready actually has just launched our strategic planning process. So a few things about this so that I can preview for you what's going to be coming down the pike in the coming months. So first of all, the strategic planning is probably one of the most important ways that the Board of Trustees partner to start thinking about who the school is going to be 10 years from now. Now, usually that kind of visioning only really yields a 5-year strategic plan, but we have to think further than 5 years if we want that plan really to be impactful. And so we've kicked off this program. We kicked it off in January, the entire Board of Trustees and the leadership here at school. And in fact, we just had a steering committee meeting today, which was really exciting. And so over the coming months, you're actually going to be asked to help to participate in some of that process. The reason why is because we've hired a consultant. His name is Ian Simmons. He is excellent at what he does. He's really steeped in the world of independent schools. He knows the Fairchester area extremely well. He's done strategic planning with many of the schools that you would think of in this area, and he's done so very successfully. And what I appreciate so much about working with somebody like Ian is that because he has such a broad scope and breadth, really, of understanding of what's happening in education across the country right now, in independent schools and even outside of independent schools, he can help us think boldly about, first of all, what we're doing well now and what we want to leverage and how we want to continue to grow, so that, again, we can continue to borrow some of the best and most interesting ideas out there and really make them our own. He also definitely understands that our leadership and certainly our board is really interested in making sure that our school is not just around for a long time, but thrives for decades to come. So as much as this is going to be about a plan for the next 5 years, it's really a plan, again, that should be looking 10 years, even 20 years into the future when it comes to sustainability. Most of all, what I'm excited about exploring as part of strategic planning are all the ways that I think King can lead. That's what this is about. This school is amazing. It really is good here. It really is. I mean, I think I'm just past the part now where I can really be an objective third party for you all, but I have had experiences at lots of different places, and I'm here to tell you, it's not this good everywhere, not even here in Fairchester County. And I've heard this from so many of you as well. And so one of my hopes is that as we continue to talk about all of this, as you, for example, participate in some surveys that you're going to get from Ian Simmons, and the data that we're going to collect to get a good sense of where we are and where we can go together, so that everybody has a voice in this, I'm most interested to know where King can lead. Where is King going to lead? I've already sketched out some areas for you where I think we've got a great opportunity to do so. But the strategic plan is going to be a really wonderful way for us to articulate that, crystallize ideas, and then we're off to the races together. And the plan is for us to be working on this over the next few months, probably have a draft by the summertime, and then refine it in time to launch it to all of you in the fall. And that is something that I look forward to a lot. It's going to be a great process, and it'll be a great plan. So I appreciate you coming out tonight. As you can tell, I get very excited when I start talking about all of these aspects of the school that I have now completely and utterly fallen in love with. I'm grateful to all of you for introducing me to it, and I'm both excited and humbled to lead this school into its future. We have everything we need here so far to make this a great place for kids today. What I'm really looking forward to is leading us to a place where we continue to do things that get everybody excited about where we're going to take the kids for the future. Because what's most important is that we're graduating the students from this school who not only have the skills to get great jobs, but that they have all of the other skills to keep those great jobs, because not just of what they do, but because of who they are. That's really what makes King different. And so, and I'm sorry, and one other thing I just wanted to let you know about too is that as we've all been talking about the school that we love, I definitely have noted that the way that we talk about ourselves is something that I think we need a little bit more help with as well. We have hired a marketing firm. A number of you actually have suggested that to me in our parent meetings. So you also likely will be invited to participate in some survey work for our marketing firm. They're called Mission Minded. They do a lot of work with independent schools. And they're going to help us with some of our marketing messages, because what I really would like to see and hear more about is all of us in our community getting so excited about King School that we cannot wait to shout it from the rooftops, to talk about it all night long at cocktail parties, and tell everybody that, you know what, this is absolutely positively the best school in Fairchester County. And I'm looking forward to being in partnership with all of you on that. So thank you so much for coming. Looking forward to working with you more on the future of King. Have a great night.